What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to my Arizona Cardinals Offseason review series. In today's episode, the second episode of my series, it is going to be about the acquisition of DeAndre "Nuke" Hopkins, moving on from David Johnson and his very large running back contract, and also we will be touching over the players returning from injury. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I mean, this was the move of the offseason. Steve Keim, I tip my hat to you. This was incredible. I was not expecting such a big move for our Arizona Cardinals, and this was incredible. I do recall just prior to free agency, the week of free agency starting, that there was a rumor circulating that Arizona was in the works to psych up a big trade for a wide receiver, and I was expecting that to be Diggs, Stephon Diggs. You know, we saw him training in the Arizona Cardinals shirt as well, which I was either thinking it was going to be Stephon Diggs due to that, and also him, making it quite clear he wanted to get traded, along with, the continuous rumors of Odell Beckham Jr. going to be traded. So those were the two wide receivers I had assumed. No way did I think Houston would ever deal DeAndre Hopkins for such a little, such a small return. Honestly, when I had received the Bleacher Report notifications for this trade, the first notification I had received was around 3 a.m. here in Australia, saying that we had transition tagged Kenyon Drake, which, when I had initially woken up around 6 o'clock in the morning, I was in a bit of a shock to read that initial notification, because then our cap allocation to running backs, I believe, would have been number one in the league, and it would have just been an outrageous sum of money to be paying for the running back core. And then the second notification I'd read was Texans trade for David Johnson, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. We're getting rid of David Johnson, going to keep Kenyon Drake for another year, but we've probably given up some draft capital to get rid of David Johnson and his contract, or there's going to be some dead money involved with Johnson's contract. And then the very next few notifications were Hopkins traded to Cardinals, and then the full trade details, where I couldn't go back to sleep at this point. I couldn't believe the trade details, where the Cardinals had acquired Hopkins and a 2024 round pick, and the Texans had acquired David Johnson, a 2020 second round pick, and a 2021 fourth round pick. This was highway robbery. This was one of the most lopsided trades maybe ever. I could not believe this trade had happened when I had seen it. Just an incredible move by Steve Keim to kick off the offseason. I think the Calais Campbell trade went through prior to this trade being known, and I was quite angry, because you would have loved to see Calais Campbell finish, and he should have finished his career as a Cardinal. He should have been a Cardinal for life. And the Baltimore Ravens only gave up a 5th round pick for that trade. And I was thinking, Steve Keim could have given up either our 5th round pick or even a 4th. I would have given away a 4th round pick for Calais Campbell, get some more help on our defensive line. But this was just an absolute fleecing from the Houston Texans. DeAndre Hopkins in targets over the last 5 seasons was ranked 1st in the NFL, ranked 2nd in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, and 2nd in receiving touchdowns. Those last 3 statistics, he only trailed either Julio Jones or Antonio Brown, which, those 3 receivers, Nuke, AB, and Julio, were obviously, in my opinion, are the top 3 wide receivers for those 5 years. And Nuke is only 27 years old. He's still in the peak, in his prime. So an incredible move. And then if you compare it to David Johnson's production, In 2016, he came close to having the 1,000 season. He had 20 total touchdowns. And then from 2017 to 2019, his production was slightly better in those 3 seasons than it was in that one season in 2016. Yes, he was injured for just shy of an entire season with the wrist injury, but you have to play that into account when you're considering the move. An injury-prone running back with a very large contract for a since AB's out of the league, you could make a case top 2. With Michael Thomas, you could make a case top 3. At the very worst, you could make a case top 5. So an incredible move to acquire DeAndre Hopkins to kick off the offseason. In a recent in a recent top 50 rankings, Pro Football Focus, their top 50 players heading into 2020, they had DeAndre Hopkins ranked 9th. David Johnson did not make the list. Number 9 in the entire league, they had DeAndre Nuke Hopkins. I think, yes, the biggest splash move of the offseason, the best move of the offseason. You didn't have to give up a first-round pick. If you look at what Buffalo gave up to acquire Stephon Diggs, they gave up a first with multiple later-round picks, whereas Steve Keim committed highway robbery, giving up a second-round pick and a 4th next year's draft, getting out of that terrible contract and acquiring a top 3 receiver in the league to give Kyler Murray that true number 1 receiver, which a lot of mock drafts had us taking, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy to get Kyler that number 1. To get Kyler that number 1 receiver. So going into the draft, that was that was our biggest need, debatably our biggest need on the offense ticked off. So an awesome move there by Steve Keim. 10 out of 10 move, honestly. No complaints from me. We're probably going to have to give him a new deal, but if you want a top 3 receiver in the league, he deserves to be compensated as a top 3 receiver in the league. So he's most likely going to get a new deal, and he deserves a new deal. So making that trade, Steve Keim was 100% aware that Hopkins required a new deal, so it was a no-brainer to make the trade, even if you have to give him a new deal. I can't say enough good things about this trade. It was definitely a #Keim time move. We haven't seen those types of moves in quite some time, so it was very, very relieving to see that. It was the first move we made in the free agency window. Let's move into the second part of the video with the players returning from injury. And in part 2 of episode 2 of the Arizona Cardinals Offseason review, we'll be having a look at players returning from injury for the 2020 NFL season. The players I'll be going over in a bit more detail will be Zach Allen, Hakeem Butler, and Robert Alford. I'll just briefly touch on Marcus Gilbert and DJ Foster, as I did cover those 2 players in the first episode of this series. I do expect Marcus Gilbert to be the starting right tackle. Went down with an ACL injury last year, but I do believe he'll be the starting right tackle if he is healthy to start the season, to give Josh Jones a bit more time to develop as the future starting right tackle. Now, with DJ Foster, I don't think he's going to make the team, just because you do have Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, and then our 7th round draft pick, Eno Benjamin. So maybe DJ makes the team as the 4th running back, but I guess we'll have to wait and see on that. So with Zach Allen, our third round draft pick out of Boston College, where he played edge at Boston College in a 4-3 defense. A lot of the draft experts had Zach Allen moving to the interior, moving into the NFL. Matt Miller had him as his 9th overall edge rusher on his big board from the Bleacher Report / Stick to Football podcast. His co-worker Connor Rogers had Zach Allen ranked 28th overall on his big board. The two comparisons they had for Zach Allen were Cam Hayward and Dietrich Wise. Cam Hayward being sort of a very big call to make. Cam Hayward, an awesome player. In 2018, Zach Allen, his numbers were pretty good. He had 15 tackles for loss, 61 tackles, and 6.5 sacks in that 2018 season. And I believe the year before that, he had over 100 tackles as a defensive lineman, which is absolutely ridiculous. In terms of PFF grading, he was 40th overall on their big board, with his edge rusher ranking being number 6 on their board. And per their grading scale, he got better in both run defense and pass rushing through his tenure at Boston College. Now, Brett Coleman, one of my favorite YouTubers, the Film Room series that he does, in his mock draft, he had Zach Allen going 28th to the Chargers in the first round. He compared him to a Kyle Williams type player where he could play between the 2 and 5 technique. I guess just in that draft class, it was a very strong defensive line class. It was known as the defensive line class. So he wasn't one of the big names there. Maybe that's why he did fall to the 3rd round. But I guess sort of some issues there were a lot of people were expecting him to move from the edge to the inside when he does play in the league. His frame can fit that extra 10 pounds that he needs to move into the inside. He did play, I believe, 4 games prior to getting a neck injury and then ending the season on IR. He did play in the preseason as well, where he did flash against Minnesota. So hopefully moving into this season, we can see more of that sort of pass rush potential. I think he will grade out as a good run defender, but would like to see some pass rush from Zach Allen in his second year, especially under the new coach, Brenston Buckner. I think Zach Allen could have a very good year, and we do need help on that interior line. There needs to be someone else on the team that steps up to rush the passer. Besides Chandler Jones, he does need some help on the interior. So really excited to see Zach Allen returning. I have high expectations for Zach Allen. The draft community was very high on Zach Allen going into that draft. So us getting him in the 3rd round, I thought was an absolute steal. And yes, let's move into Hakeem Butler. So there was quite a very wide range of opinions on Hakeem Butler. There was people who had Hakeem Butler ranked as their number one overall wide receiver, such as Josh Norris from Roto World, where he had him 12th overall on his big board, and number 1, of course, in his wide receiver rankings. And then you've got draft experts such as Lance Zierlein, who had him as his 13th overall wide receiver, and Daniel Jeremiah, moved the sticks. He didn't even have him in his top 50. So you can see there's a wide discrepancy there in people who liked Hakeem Butler and people who weren't as high on Hakeem Butler. Now, because I'm a huge Stick to Football fan, I will be referring to Matt Miller. Matt Miller again from Bleacher Report / Stick to Football. He had Hakeem Butler ranked 47th overall. Pro Football Focus, I'm also a big PFF guy. I know they get a lot of hate, but they had him ranked 42 overall. Hakeem Butler was ranked number 1 in deep yards and also deep pass receptions that were passes 20 plus yards down the field. And the reason why that is important with him coming back from injury is that Kyler Murray, in a recent deep passing performance article released by Pro Football Focus, PFF, they had Kyler Murray ranked 6th in their rankings for deep passing. As you can see, Hakeem Butler was known for his deep passing, deep threat ability, which plays into Kyler's strength of deep ball passing. and taking shots down the field, which, not one is exciting for fans to see, but also, you'd love to see that big play coming in from an offense. So really, really excited and intrigued to see what Hakeem Butler's going to be. Just because a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people were split on the Hakeem Butler, whether he was good, whether you liked him, or whether you thought, no, he's not going to be a good player in the NFL. Too many drops. I believe he had about 12 drops in his last season of college, which is quite concerning. But he did make up for some circus style catches. So I guess everybody's entitled to their own opinion on Hakeem Butler. I personally, I can't really make a judgment on him just because as a receiver, you've got to catch the ball. So I'm really intrigued to see what Hakeem Butler is going to be. I think he can assist in our red zone issues as well. He's a big target, so we were quite poor with our red zone ability to punch in touchdowns last year. So hopefully Hakeem Butler can help and be a threat in the red zone as well. If you get 5, 6 to 8 touchdowns from a 4th round pick, that's really, really good production. So you can't complain with a 4th round pick getting around 6 touchdowns. So it's going to be awesome to see what Hakeem Butler's going to be like in this Cliff Kingsbury offense, and I for one can't wait to see what's going to happen there. And finally, cornerback Robert Alford, who missed the entirety of the 2019 season with a leg injury. He was expected to come in as the number 2 corner behind Pat Peterson. Both of them ended up missing time, in Robert's case, the entire season, when he was acquired from the Atlanta Falcons, when they had cut him, I believe, to make room for the Grady Jarrett deal. We're paying him roughly $2 million less than what the Falcons were paying him on a yearly average, which averages out to be about $7.5 million per year. Just sticking around on the topic of his salary and the cap, if he was to be cut this year for 2020, we would have saved $4.5 million. However, it does look like he will be on the team for the 2020 season to compete for that number 2, number 3 cornerback position. He does have a connection with Pat P. When he did sign, you could tell him and Pat had communicated when he was cut, Pat hoping he'd sign with the Cardinals, which he eventually did. However, for next season in 2021, his cap hit will be around $9 million, where there is potential, if he is cut, to save $7.5 million, which, if you take into account his age at this time next year, he will be 32 years of age. Byron Murphy developing, having to re-sign Pat Peterson. If that is the option, I do believe we will re-sign Pat P. And also the development of the 2021 cornerback class. It looks like he probably won't be in the team for 2021, but strictly looking at 2020, I do believe he will compete for that number 2 and number 3 cornerback position. And we hope to have a bounce back year from Robert Alford, much like his year in 2017, which statistically, and if you're looking just purely on analytics, was his best season for the Atlanta Falcons. If you've stuck around for this long, thank you so much for watching the video. Please leave a comment with who you're most excited to see coming back from injury for our Arizona Cardinals in 2020. Next week's episode will be the 3rd episode in this series. We'll be covering the defensive acquisitions, along with some coaching changes on the defensive side of the ball, the 5th-year option declined on Hassan Reddick, and just some other minor signings on the defensive side of the ball. So I hope to see you all there. Please do take care, and until next time, see you then.